All right, so let's take a look at how courage and self-esteem are fitting together in something that we call the think, feel, do cycle. This is going to include 4 separate parts. So we have the events, anything that happens in the child's life. Then we have the thoughts, and the thoughts include the child's beliefs, their attitudes, their values, like the things that they hold most dear to them. And then it's also comprised of their feelings and their behaviors. So this is how the cycle works. When something happens to a child, an event, it triggers the thoughts, both the conscious and the unconscious. So this is the think part of it. All of his attitudes, beliefs, and values about similar situations and what he's learned to come, that all comes into play. And this thinking then produces a feeling or an emotion. So we fall into the feel category. And many people mistakenly believe that feelings just happen, but they're really products of our thoughts and our values. So change the thinking and you change the feelings too. And together, the thinking and the feeling produce an action, which is the do. And this action may have an effect on the event, which will trigger new thoughts, new feelings, and behaviors as the system goes around and around. So, for example, 10-year-old Steven's mother notices that he's left the milk out on the counter and says in an angry voice, "Steven, how many times do I have to tell you to put the milk back in the refrigerator?" So this event in Steven's life is going to trigger a lot of conscious and unconscious thoughts, like, oh, here she goes again on my case, or she has no right to yell at me, or she's always mad about something, or I'm tired of her putting me down all the time. And these thoughts produce a feeling of anger and resentment, which then trigger the following actions. Steven scowls at her, stiffens his back, and then has a sharp reply of, "Why are you always making such a big deal out everything?" And that behavior is going to trigger Steven's mother to respond with an angry remark of her own. "Well, I wouldn't have to make a big deal out of it if you show a little responsibility." Mom's autocratic style and her punishing remark continue to trigger Steven's rebellious attitude and thinking. "She can't treat me this way." And then he's going to shout that and storm out in anger. And the cycle is going to continue. And this is where we fall into the failure cycle. When a child reacts to events in his life with low self-esteem and a poorly developed system of values, the discouragement and negative behavior that follow usually produce more negative events, such as failure and punishment. So in Steven's case, the events might include getting into more power struggles with his mother, or even causing problems at school or with his peers. And this misbehavior often provokes really harsh criticism and punishment from autocratic adults. So for the child, this triggers more faulty thinking and lower self-esteem and more discouragement and more negative behavior and more failure. And before long, a cycle of frustration and failure are going to develop. And the child who's gotten caught in a failure cycle will need a lot of support and encouragement to break out of it. We also have the success cycle. A child with a well-developed set of values and high self-esteem might have responded very differently to his mother's criticism. He may have thought, "Oops, I messed up," or "Mom's pretty angry about the milk," or "I wish she wouldn't get so upset about it though. Maybe I can help her calm down some." And these thoughts produce feelings of genuine remorse and courage. And that's going to trigger a couple of actions. So the child may give a concerned look, make eye contact with mom, and reply back with, "My bad, here, let me put it back." And this positive behavior triggers mom to respond with a softer remark. "Okay, but remember on your own next time, please." And that becomes the new event for the child's think, feel, do cycle, and they're going to respond with, "Sure, mom, I'll make it a point to remember." And when a child has a high self-esteem that's based on positive values and behavior, he can take a mistake or even a failure and turn it into a positive experience, one where they're going to learn from their mistakes. And this positive behavior usually produces additional successful events, including positive feedback from adults. And these successes strengthen self-esteem and courage, and they're going to motivate the child to produce more effort and positive behavior, and thus more success. And that's what we call the success cycle. And it's going to be summed up by the popular expression, nothing succeeds like success. So now we have the flooding response. And sometimes a child becomes so frustrated that the feeling part of the brain releases chemicals that flood the thinking part of the brain, and a meltdown of sort occurs. We call them tantrum. And during these times, the child temporarily loses the ability to use higher level rational parts of the brain and reverts back to more primitive parts to control their behavior. So trying to talk rationally to a child during one of these episodes is about as useful as trying to stop an actual flash flood with a lecture. Some children, and we typically refer to these children as very spirited children, they experience a more extreme version of this flooding response. When they become overwhelmed, it's not your typical 20-minute tantrum. Their epic tantrums can last a couple of hours or until somebody helps the child calm down and regain their equilibrium. So in lesson 5, we're going to be addressing ways that we can help children learn to manage anger and calm down when they do become flooded. So what do we do as parents? Helping our children get into success cycles and stay there is really the goal for all parents. Helping them to develop the character to be successful within the rules and limits of society, that's the responsibility of all parents. So it's important for us to become skilled at encouraging the development of self-esteem and courage and character. But what does that word encourage really mean? Well, when we break it down into two parts, in and courage, it means instill courage. Rudolf Dreikurs once said, "Children need encouragement like plants need water." Encouragement is a fertilizer that nourishes our children's courage, their self-esteem, their character, and their skills. And wherever it's applied, we see more growth. Do you want your child to be a good reader? Encourage their reading. Do you want them to be honest? Encourage acts of honesty. What about responsibility, cooperation, and courage? Where you sprinkle encouragement, you're going to spur growth. And so the rest of this lesson is all about helping you strengthen your skills in this critical area of parenting.